Okay, well, let me welcome you to Christology, Religious Studies 271, and we'll talk briefly about what Christology is, and we'll also get into a brief conversation about the syllabus. So while we're doing this, what you'll need is you'll need to have the syllabus with you. You can either print it out or follow it online or on an iPad or something like that. But before we do that, let me welcome you to the course. My name is Dr. David Wheeler-Reed. My last name is hyphenated. It's Wheeler-Reed, but sometimes people call me Dr. Reed. Sometimes people call me Dr. Wheeler. That's totally, completely fine. I will answer to either, but it is actually Dr. Wheeler-Reed. So if you want to be very, very formal, you can call me Dr. Wheeler-Reed and keep it hyphenated as it is. Before I came to Albertus Magnus College, I graduated with my PhD in New Testament and Early Christian Studies in 2013 from the University of Toronto in Toronto, Canada. I'm not Canadian. People often mistake me for being Canadian for one reason or another. I'm not quite sure why, but I'm not Canadian. I actually grew up in the Midwest in Ohio in a city called Cincinnati. After I finished my PhD, I was a researcher at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, and after that I came to Yale University where I was a postdoctoral fellow for a few years. And while I was here, I started teaching at Albertus Magnus College, and I have not left. So I'm still here, which is a good thing. I like it here quite a bit. And this is the first time that I've taught this course, Christology, several times, but this is the first time that I've done the course entirely online. So if this is somewhat new to you, it's also somewhat new to me. You could read more about me on the course website under the intro to Dr. D. A lot of my undergraduate students here, instead of calling me Dr. Wheeler-Reed or Professor Wheeler-Reed, just shorten it all to Dr. D as for Dr. David, which is totally fine with me if you address me that way. So anyway, welcome to the course, and what we're going to do here for probably the next 30-35 minutes is just simply talk about what the course is about, get you oriented to the syllabus, and then of course if you have any questions, please email me right away and I will get back to you as soon as possible. If you hear anything in the background, if you hear a cat meowing or anything like that, that is one of my 3 cats. My cat Jinga likes to hang around me a lot in my study and in my office. So if you hear a cat meowing or anything, that's Jinga. All right, well, before we get into the syllabus, let's just talk about this course. Let's talk about this thing called Christology. You might even be wondering, what in the world is Christology? Well, Christology is kind of complicated, and you're going to find out that there is a reason why there is an entire course devoted to this subject of Christology. And as simple as it maybe should be, it's not. It's complex. Now, the simplest way to get into a discussion about what Christology is just to look at this word Christology. Any word in English that ends in ology means the study of. So for instance, if you're talking about zoology, zoology is the study of animal life. Biology is the study of life. Geology is the study of the earth. Theology is the study of God. So Christology, at its most basic level, is simply the study of Christ, or the study of the Christ. I mean, that's what the word means in English. If you were to look it up in any dictionary, that should be the basic dictionary definition of the term. It is the study of the Christ. Now, of course, the question is, well, what in the world is the Christ? Well, Christ, and I've put it here on your slide, Christ comes from a Greek word. We can transliterate it into English as C-H-R-I-S-T-O-S. This Greek word is pronounced Christos. And Christos is a Greek term that simply means the anointed one. Now, I'll talk more about what that means in a second, but if you were really just going to ask a theologian, a religious scholar, what is Christology? What they should tell you is not it's the study of Jesus. That might be what you're thinking, but what they'll actually tell you is it's the study of the anointed one, which is kind of obscure. It kind of makes you wonder, well, who's that? And what's that all about? Well, anybody that takes a Christology course usually assumes, and rightly so, that the course is about this guy called Jesus, or an individual that we sometimes call Jesus Christ, or even Jesus the Christ. It's probably not the case with any of you listening to this, but there are people still in the United States and in Western Europe and places like Europe and or places like England and France and Germany, Spain, Canada, up north, who think that Christ is Jesus' last name. Now, it's not Jesus' last name. Jesus Christ is a shortened form of Jesus the Christ. So anytime you see in the New Testament Jesus Christ, what you're really seeing in the Bible is Jesus the Christ. So it's not his last name. It's a title. So another way you could read it is anytime you see Jesus Christ or Jesus the Christ is simply to change it to Jesus the Anointed One or Jesus who is the Anointed One. Now, Jesus was a Jew, and we'll come back to that many times in this course. And the Greek term Christos actually stands for a Jewish term, which is Messiah. Jews would have pronounced this Mashiach. So when we talk about Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Anointed One, a more Jewish way of saying that is simply to say Jesus the Messiah. So Christology, if you want to think of it this way, is simply just a course about Jesus as the Messiah. But where this gets complicated, and you're going to find that this is true throughout the last 2,000 years of Christian history, of church history, is that everyone wonders what in the world does it mean that Jesus is the Messiah? Not everyone in the time of Jesus was on the same page in answering this question. Some thought the Messiah meant this, some thought the Messiah meant that. It's the same thing today. I mean, it's amazing all that we know historically and theologically about Jesus. And yet, down to this day, we are still wrestling with what does it mean that Jesus is the Messiah? And that's really what Christology is about. It's the study of Jesus as the Messiah. Essentially, what does it mean that he is the Messiah? Okay, well, let's leave that aside for a moment because we're going to have several weeks to work on an answer to that question. So if you have your syllabus handy, let's look at it and let's start going through it, and let me point out some things on it that you'll need to know. And I'm just going to go through it from front to back in chronological order and explain a number of the features that are on the syllabus. Now, I'm not going to get into all of it because I'm assuming you can read. So you can read through it, which I encourage you to do. And please remember that a syllabus is actually a contract between a professor and her or his students. So we're kind of agreeing here right now to this is what the class is going to be, this is what I expect of you, and you're agreeing to follow this syllabus and these expectations. Now, of course, things can change because of life, illness, etc. during a course, but this is the basic contract between you and me and what we're going to do throughout this course. So this is kind of what I promise to do, and you're promising to adhere to it and do what I ask you to do. So if you look at the top of the syllabus, obviously this is Spring 2017, Mod 3, and this is the fully online version of Christology, and you can see there all of my contact info. Now, obviously things like office hours may not apply to you, but if you do want to come in and see me, my office, my temporary office, is in Aquinas Hall G2. It's in the basement of Aquinas Hall. And my office hours are by appointment because my schedule is very, very erratic, but that's good because it means I will work around your schedule. So please, if you get lost, the second you get lost, I cannot stress this enough. Make an appointment and come see me. Come see me numerous times if you need to do that. In fact, I say much later on in the syllabus, you will tire of seeing me well before I will ever tire of seeing you. And remember, we get paid to have office hours weekly, so make use of them. If nobody comes and sees me, I still have to hold office hours. So just email me or call and set up a time, and I will work around your schedule. That's usually the easiest thing to do than having set office hours. But please make use of those if you need those, if you need further help or what have you. The other thing there is I've given you my telephone number. I'm just giving you my cell number, my mobile number. That is much easier for me to do than to give you my office number. I always check my smartphone, so if you need to get a hold of me for any reason, to set up an appointment, to tell me you're not going to be able to complete an assignment on time, something like that, please call that number. All I ask is that you do not call before 9 a.m. and do not call me after 10 p.m. I won't answer one way or the other. But anytime during the day, if you need to get a hold of me and if it's urgent, please use that number. And there as well is my email address at Albertus, dwheelerreed@albertus.edu. And I check my email several times a day, so I will get back to you within a few hours from you writing. So there are plenty of multiple ways, I should say, of you getting in touch with me. Below that, you'll find a series of quotes that you should read through at your own leisure. Different quotes from famous scholars, one even from Jesus himself, about Christology and about Jesus. Some of these are rather fascinating quotes. I am particularly taken with the one by Albert Schweitzer, which is the second from the bottom, that says, "There is no historical task which so reveals someone's true self as the writing of a life of Jesus." You will become more and more familiar with that saying as we go through this course, but it is one of my favorite quotes about Christology and about Jesus. Essentially, what Albert Schweitzer is saying is if you really want to know who you are, figure out your Christology, because oftentimes when we talk about Christology, we aren't talking about Jesus, we're talking about ourselves. I'll explain that later on in the class, but these are some very famous quotes that are worth kind of reading and familiarizing yourself with. Now below that, much more importantly, is the class motto. And this is my motto for any class that I teach. So let me tell you how to pronounce this in Latin. You can practice, in fact, you should practice it on a daily basis. The Latin phrase for the class motto is de omnibus dubitandum. Again, de omnibus dubitandum. And what that means in English is doubt everything. I know that probably seems weird for a religious studies class because you might be thinking, well, wait a minute. Isn't religion supposed to teach me faith? No, not in a university setting. Any humanities course, I don't care if it's religion, I don't care if it's English, history, philosophy, psychology, you name it, it is there to teach you de omnibus dubitandum, doubt everything. What doubt everything means is it's the beginning, it's the gateway to critically thinking. In fact, once you figure out this statement and how it applies to everything in life, a university really should just hand you your degree and send you on your way. Because the entire reason you go to a liberal arts school or you take a humanities course, unlike a business course or a math course or a science course, is to learn that statement, that everything can be doubted. And this is so important in the day and age that we live in of fake news, of people that get their news off of Twitter and Facebook. I do that too sometimes. But it's very important for us to be skeptical. And that's what good critical thinking is about, whether it's in a religion course or whether it's in an English course, is to learn to doubt everything. In fact, another way of putting it is this. When I was a teenager, I remember my father, who's a retired banker now, he always used to tell me, he would say, son, believe nothing that you hear and only a third of what you read. And that's the same thing as saying de omnibus dubitandum, doubt everything. But if you think about it, if you were skeptical of everything everybody said to you and said, well, I better check that out, or if you didn't necessarily believe everything you read, only a third of it, I mean, our society would probably be a lot better off. Now, if you're cynical and you figured out the trick here, that means you should also doubt yourself, and you should doubt your colleagues in the class, and you should doubt me. Because I might not always be telling you the truth, or I might be wrong on something. But really the beginning of wisdom is to doubt everything. And in fact, I would say that if you really want to have faith in something, if you really want to believe in something, you can't believe it, even Jesus, even a religion, until you have doubted it. Because once you've doubted it and you come to believe in it, then you know why you believe in it, and you know the problems of believing in a particular thing or a particular person. So that's the class motto, and that will come up numerous times. Doubt everything. In fact, if you were asking me my teaching strategy or my teaching philosophy, I would tell you there are 3 things I want you to get out of any of my classes. 1, I want you to improve your critical thinking. 2, I want you to become a better writer, because that is an art that is slowly dying in this world of ours. And then I also want you to become a better critical reader, to learn what's important in a text and what's not important in a text. And sometimes that means learning how to skim through a text. So critical thinking, better writing, better reading. That's what this class, even though it's about Jesus, that's what it's ultimately trying to improve in your skill set. All right, well, I'm not going to bother too much with the course description because I've talked about that a bit with defining the term Christology, but you can read through it. It's very, very basic. We will ultimately be dealing with a question that Jesus himself posed to his first followers. That question is, who do you say that I am? And as you'll see, this is a rather difficult question to answer. Even if you get the answer right, you have to know what the answer means. But as I said, we will come back to that. Well, let's move on to the required text, which is on the 2nd page of your syllabus. All of these texts are required. I know it looks like a lot of texts, but you will not be reading all the way through. Any of these texts, you will be using sections from each one of them. Christology is a very complicated subject, a very complex subject, and yes, you do need these books, and in fact, I would recommend getting them and having them on your shelf because they are actually good reference works for anything that might be asked of you later in life about Jesus. And some of these are some of the most up-to-date texts on the subject of Jesus and Christology. So just to go through this in order, the first book I want you to have is a book by Michael Coogan, that he's the editor of the New Oxford Annotated Bible with Apocrypha, the New Revised Standard Version. Now, a couple of things. One, if you have a Bible and it's your favorite Bible, then go ahead and use it. But you should be aware of the fact that the New Revised Standard Version is the standard scholarly English translation that all universities expect you to use. Whether you're quoting the Bible in an English course, a history course, a philosophy course, a religion course, the NRSV, as it's called, is the text you should be using. The Oxford Annotated Bible with Apocrypha is one of the standards that's used in universities throughout this country and throughout the world. You can find other NRSVs like the HarperCollins Society of Biblical Literature NRSV, which is just as good. But this is a text you should have, but as I said, if you have your own Bible in a different translation, that's fine. If you do not have a Bible, I suggest investing in one like this. This is also a study Bible, so it contains numerous notes and introductions to texts maps, all that sort of stuff, pictures, who doesn't like pictures, to many of the things you'll be reading about in this course. If you are absolutely 100% unfamiliar with how a Bible works, like for instance in the syllabus later on when I say read the Gospel of Mark, if you have no idea where that is, what I suggest you do is click on the link, How to Use a Study Bible, and read through that. If it still doesn't make sense to you, then get in touch with me and I will work through this with you. Usually most students are somewhat familiar with how to read a Bible and how to find books in the Bible, but if you are not, make sure you check on that link, which will be on the course, the e-learning course website, and if that still doesn't help you, make sure you get in touch with me. But you will need a Bible for a good chunk of this course because we will be reading the 4 Gospels and other sections of the Bible known as the New Testament. The second book listed there is a book by Bart D. Ehrman, a friend of mine, called Lost Scriptures, Books That Did Not Make It into the New Testament. Part of what you will be doing in this course is not just reading about what early Christians like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, James, the author of Revelation, had to say about Jesus. You'll also be looking at what other Christians outside of the books in the New Testament 200 or 300 years after Jesus had to say about Jesus. Now, these texts that are in this book called Lost Scriptures, these were texts that were not accepted by the church hierarchy. These are texts that are considered heretical texts. They are not considered orthodox texts with a small o. But you should have some exposure to this, like the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. In fact, some of these texts are very, very important because of Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code, movies like Stigmata, or even The Last Temptation of Christ. And usually every Easter, whether it's in Time Magazine or Newsweek or U.S. News and World Report, you hear some sort of strange discussion about lost texts. Well, they aren't really lost. They're all translated into English, and you'll find them here in this nice, convenient volume. So Lost Scriptures contains some texts outside of the New Testament from people that thought they were Christians, that were branded heretics by other Christians, but you should have some familiarity with what others were saying about Jesus in the 2nd and 3rd century, particularly in places like Egypt. After Ehrman's book, a book you'll be using quite a bit of is by a very difficult name to pronounce, Kärkkäinen, Veli-Matti Kärkkäinen. We will just stop pronouncing his name right now. It is a book called Christology, A Global Introduction. It is a very easy to read introductory text to the entire issue of Christology. We won't read all the way through it, but it is a book that you should definitely read and familiarize yourself with throughout the course. It's sort of a history book of everything that's happened in Christology from the time of Jesus down to the 21st century. And it is in its 2nd edition. I did check, and the bookstore does have the right edition now. They did get it in the other day. Another book that we'll be using quite often is a book by Jaroslav Pelikan. He, to his friends, is known as Jerry Pelikan. He taught over at Yale University for years. This is a book called Jesus Through the Centuries, His Place in the History of Culture. This is a book that we're going to read alongside many of the other writings, and this is a book that gives you a glimpse into what followers of Jesus 300, 400, 500, 600 to even 1,000 years, 1,200 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus had to say about Jesus. So if you ever wondered, what did St. Augustine think of Jesus? What did Thomas Aquinas think of Jesus? What did Martin Luther think of Jesus? This is what this book is for. The next book on the list is a book by Mark Allen Powell called Jesus as a Figure in History, How Modern Historians View the Man from Galilee. This is a book that we will use later on in the course towards the end. This is a book that will familiarize you as quickly and easily as possible with what modern historians like me have had to say about Jesus as a historical figure. There are a lot of debates among historians today. Jewish historians, Christian historians, atheists who are historians, agnostics who are historians, about who is Jesus. And a lot of what they have to say disagrees with the church. Some of it overlaps with the church. Some of it is forging whole new directions and trajectories. But you should be familiar with the modern quest, or I should actually say quests, plural, for the historical Jesus. So we will use this book a few chapters of it towards the end of this course. It's a book that you'll probably return to at the end of this course to learn even more about what modern historians across the entire gamut, from believers to non-believers, have had to say about Jesus of Nazareth. Finally, a book we're going to use briefly is a book by W. Barnes Tatum called Jesus at the Movies, A Guide to the First 100 Years. This is a great book in that it's very important for people to realize that you don't just learn about Christology through the New Testament, through the Bible. You don't just learn about it through the early church fathers and church councils like Nicaea and Chalcedon and Ephesus. You actually learn a lot about Jesus through art, through literature, and here through film. There are some amazing films that have come out on Jesus, and like a lot of things, sometimes what we believe as a culture, as a society about Jesus comes more from art, literature, and film than it does from the Bible itself. And so this is a book to get you thinking about that. And in fact, one of the movies we're going to watch, you'll watch it online, is a movie by the British comedy group Monty Python called The Life of Brian, which is one of the most brilliant Jesus movies out there. There are many others we could watch, but this is a book that's worth keeping because you can learn all kinds of things about Christology by simply watching films about Jesus and trying to figure out the Christology of the writer of a film or the writers of a film, the actors, and things like that. So those are the textbooks we're going to be using. I did check the other day. They are all there in the Albertus Magnus bookstore. Of course, if you want to order them through Amazon or anything like that, please feel free to do that. Below that, we have the student learning objectives. You can read through those. What you will discover is that this is a course that looks at Christology from many different angles. If you want to think of it this way, if you're a fan of football, when you're 4th and goal and you're the offense, you sometimes, as the quarterback, you hand off the ball to your best running back and they run straight up the middle. And you can't tell, as somebody watching this on TV, if the running back broke the plane, if they got the ball over the pylon. And from one angle, it looks like, no, they didn't. But from a camera angle nobody ever saw, that's suddenly shown to you, you realize, wow, the running back got the ball over the plane. He broke the plane. That's kind of what this course is like. So we're taking this figure Jesus, and we're going to talk about him from the perspective of modern film, from the perspective of modern historians, from the perspective of the Bible, from the perspective of Christians who were considered heretics, from the perspective of Christian councils like Ephesus, Chalcedon, Nicaea. We're looking at Jesus through multiple lenses and multiple angles. Same individual, but we're going to end up with multiple perspectives on this guy. And if there's one big idea that you need to get out of this, if there's one thing that you learn in all of this, it's that there is more than one Christology out there. There has always been more than one Christology out there. That doesn't mean one is right and the others are wrong. One of the great things about a course like this is that you'll discover fairly quickly that there are multiple Christologies that are probably right or closer to the truth or something like that if you want to think about it. There are multiple answers to this question of who is Jesus. So even though there's all these objectives and things that I want you to learn, the big thing you're going to learn throughout this course is that everybody kind of has their own Christology. And one of the things you need to do throughout this course is develop your own or refine the one that you have, or maybe even get rid of the one you have for a different one. So there isn't one right answer at all to this course. There are several answers. And so part of the objective of this course is to get you to realize that. All right, probably one of the most important things here is grades, assignments, the course requirements. So if you turn over to page 3, let's go through these. As I point out in the course assignments, requirements, I generally do not accept late work. If you have a valid excuse, yes, I will accept it. Valid excuses include things like there's a death in the family, you are seriously ill, as in you have flu or bronchitis or strep throat or something like that. Death and sickness of a pet does in fact count. I mean, you're adults, you know what this stuff means. Just invalid excuses are things like my computer exploded at the moment before the assignment was due, things like that. But generally I do not accept late work, but if you do have a valid excuse, obviously we will make other arrangements for it. But you need to tell me, you need to get a hold of me, email me and let me know that you're behind. Let me know what's going on. The worst thing you can do is not keep me informed. Now, if you look at the course requirements, 10% of your final grade is simply going to be attendance. And the way that I will track this is based on your progress each week. If you are logging on to the system, you are doing the assignments, you are listening to the lectures, that is your attendance. So if you do all of that, this is a no-brainer grade. The 10% is a gift. It's simply there to bounce you up. If you're borderline from a C+, B-, and you've done all your attendance, it's 100%, then obviously you get bounced up to the B-. Now, be mindful of the fact that this is a quick, condensed, accelerated course. So what would normally take place over 16 weeks, you're doing it in 7 or 8. If you miss more than 4 courses without a valid excuse, I do have to give you an F for the course or an incomplete. This is part of Albertus policy. You can read all of this about all of this in the Albertus Magnus course catalog. So again, regular attendance means showing up, logging on, doing your work, etc. You will also have weekly reading assignments. These are in the syllabus. You will have questions that you need to answer in the weekly forums, and you will have online quizzes, which will count for 20% of your final grade. I will drop your lowest quiz score. Keep that in mind. So if you blow a quiz or 2 right at the beginning, that's not that big of a deal. The quizzes will always appear in the Thursday course online section. Now, the forums are going to be questions, discussion questions that everyone should participate in. I have an example online of what a good forum response should be. So basically what will happen is you will do reading throughout the week. You will listen to either me lecturing or someone else lecturing, and then you will have a forum discussion of a few questions asking you to interact with what you've read or what you've heard. Now, there is a right way to do that and a wrong way to do that, and I've provided an example for you on the course e-learning website of what I expect from you, and you will get a grade every week on this, not just on your quiz, which will be online and automatic, but I will also send you a forum grade. You will be graded on things like your grammar, your ideas. Does it look like you read stuff, or are you just making stuff up, which is way too easy to tell if you do that. The biggest mistake you can make here is just simply responding in a sentence or 2 of, I really liked this week's lecture. I really liked this week's reading assignments. That's not what the forums are for. Each forum has a very specific question. If we were doing this in class, this would be class discussion. This would be you writing little summaries of things that you've read or interacted with throughout the week. So please take these very, very seriously because losing 20% of your grade is not a good thing. And again, check the sample on the course e-learning website to see how to do this. You will have an online midterm exam on Thursday, February 9th. It will go up online. It will be about 45 to 50 questions. These will consist of multiple choice, fill in the blank, short answer, true, false questions. I will give you a study guide about a week prior to that exam of everything you should know for that exam. The midterm will only cover everything that we have talked about up to the midterm. That will be 30% of your final grade. And then you will have an online final exam, which will be 40% of your final grade, and it will only cover what we do from midterm on. So anything that's on the midterm exam will not be on the final exam. And again, it'll be about 45 to 50 questions, which you will take online. If you're a bit afraid of writing, I suggest in the syllabus that you get a hold of a book by William Strunk and E.B. White called The Elements of Style. It's right there below the final exam, number 4. I expect you to use good grammar and to write well. I also have online for you some of my pet peeves about writing, which you should look through. There are certain things that I do want you to do because I do want you to learn how to be a better writer in this course. Okay, so 10% for attendance, 20% for the assignments, forums, and quizzes, 30% for the midterm, and 40% for the final. The grading scale, I won't spend any time on that, is taken directly from the Albertus Magnus course catalog. There's not really much to say on that. So let's turn to the readings. This starts on page 4. This is an accelerated course. So obviously you are doing a full semester's worth of work in a truncated period of time. So you have half the time to do it, which means in half the time you have to do twice as much work. So there is a lot of reading here, but you need to just simply stay on top of it. In fact, in a typical undergraduate course in the state of Connecticut, the requirement is that an undergrad per course does about 60 to 100 pages of reading per course. That is something that is set by state law. It is also set by federal law. So that's, you basically don't have any more than 60-some pages per week. If you stay on top of it, you will be fine. Do not get behind on this. One of the things that I suggest is that you do all the reading prior to coming to the e-learning website and seeing what's up for Tuesday, January 17th, and do all the reading before you show up at the site to see what's going on Thursday, January 19th. You need to read before. And if it doesn't make sense, it will start to make sense as you listen to lectures, as you participate in the quizzes and the forums, and as you also respond to your fellow colleagues in the forums and read the responses of others in the class. In fact, one last thing on forums is don't just write your forum response and then stop. After you write it, read what other people are writing, respond to them, disagree with them, argue with them, and be nice about it, but this is your chance for class discussion. This is what we have to do in an online setting. And I will get in there and respond as well. And when I respond back. You're not going to offend me if you disagree or something like that. So what I've done is organized all of the readings Tuesday, Thursday, showing you what you need to do. Everything is from the books or it's from the biblical text. So if you let's look at an example here for this upcoming week. Tuesday, January 17th. The subject for that class is prospectus, which is kind of what we're doing now. The Gospel of Mark, according to Mark, God's Son of Man and Wounded Healer. The Gospel according to Matthew, a new Moses, a higher vision. And then below that, I tell you what I want you to read for that day. So I say, read all of the Gospel of Mark. Now, those of you who are familiar with the biblical text, with the Bible, know what that means. It means go to the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament and read all of it. If you are unfamiliar with where the Gospel of Mark is, click that link on how to use a study Bible, or if you're still lost, contact me and I will explain to you how to do it. Below that, you'll see Pelican, which is the Yaroslav Pelikan book, Jesus. You're to read the introduction, and there you see the pages in chapter 6. There you see the page numbers. And then Karkainen, his Christology book, and you see all the page numbers. And then on Thursday, we'll be dealing more with the Gospel according to Matthew. You'll read all of the Gospel of Matthew. You'll watch an online lecture from Del Martin, not from me, on the Gospel of Matthew. And then you'll answer your forum questions about Martin's lecture, and you'll take the very first quiz. So just follow the readings in this syllabus day by day. Just get on there, mark things off as you do them, and do them in order. This is all set up to help you and to facilitate you and your learning outcomes. So this will happen for several weeks. If you get behind, make sure you get caught up as quickly as possible. If you have questions on it, obviously there are numerous ways of contacting me. Now, a few odds and ends here. If you turn over to page 6, we are required by Albertus Magnus College to include the tradition of honor. There have been some changes at Albertus Magnus since you might have taken your last online course. So every syllabus now has to talk about the tradition of honor. It is something that you signed on to as being a student here. It's part of your student code. It's part of your student handbook. I obviously online am not going to have you write. If you look at that paragraph on the tradition of honor on page 6, I'm obviously not going to have you write, I declare the honor pledge on electronic writings. That doesn't make any sense for our purposes. But please know that you are bound to that, and you are, by being in this course, upholding that honor code. Now, what that mainly entails is that you're not going to cheat and that you are not going to plagiarize. Obviously, I cannot stop you online from using your books and using your notes when you take quizzes and when you take exams. I have no policy on that one way or the other for an online course. It is as hard to use your notes as it is not to use them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll do well if you take a quiz or an exam open book. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. So it's up to you whether or not you want to do that. But cheating is absolutely unacceptable. Now, in an online course, you're monitoring yourself on that, and it has to be up to your own conscience what you do and do not do. Obviously, in writing, whether it's a forum post or something else, plagiarism is unacceptable. It is the most serious academic offense. It is the one that annoys me the most, and it is the one that your student handbook and the university itself here will punish the most harshly. If you flip over to page 7, and by the way, before I go further, if you do not know what plagiarism is, or if you have questions about cheating or things like that, what you need to do is simply get in touch with me to find out if you're violating something. If you flip over to page 7, there's some statements on special needs and accommodations. If you are a special needs student, that works very differently when we're talking about an online course, but again, you need to get in touch with me right away to talk about that and what you may or may not need to do. And finally, you'll notice on page 7 some discussion about credit hours. Credit hours and the requirements of credit hours are set by the state of Connecticut and by the Department of Education. So 1 hour of classroom or direct faculty instruction and a minimum of 2 hours of out-of-class student work each week for approximately 15 weeks for one semester, the equivalent amount of work over a different amount of time, is a definition of 1 credit hour. If you are taking 3, you multiply that by 3. You can read about this here. You can read about it in the student handbook and the course catalog. But it is important to note that this is what Albertus Magnus College expects of you in terms of time per week that you spend on a course. It's also what the state of Connecticut and the U.S. Department of Education expects that you spend the amount of time, the minimum amount of time that you spend on a course. So I don't know if this has ever been presented to you or not, but we are required now to put this on each syllabus that we have as instructors, as professors, and these are the types of things that you should be well aware of, that this is the time commitment to any kind of college class. So just please be aware of that. Now below this I have several instructor policies. Some of these will probably make you laugh, but these are a series of questions I have heard over the last 2 or 3 years, not just here, but at other places, that never cease to amaze me that students ask, and my responses to those questions. Things like, just to give you an example, one of the most frequently recurring questions that is often asked of me: I am taking your class, this is on page 8, but won't be able to attend very often because my life is very complicated. Will you overlook this and give me the grade I would have earned if my life hadn't been so complicated? These are odd questions, but they often come up, and so these instructor policies are just questions that I often get and my stock answer to those questions. And perhaps the most important thing from those instructor policies, it should also be a class motto, I guess, is remember, you don't get the grade you think you deserve. You get the grade you earned. So just please understand, I am here to do everything in the world to help you succeed and get the grade you have earned. The grade you think you deserve, that's a whole different story. But I will do everything I can to help you do well in this class, but that also means you have to put in the effort for it. Otherwise, you get what you earned, not what you deserve, not what you think you deserve. Okay, so once you get done listening to this, I want you to go to the water cooler forum and answer the questions there about yourself. So I want you to think of this as, here you are, you're in an online course, and you need to converse with your fellow students, your fellow colleagues taking this course with you. They don't see you, they don't know who you are, unless you've put up your picture, which I would suggest doing. Sometimes it's easier to put a face with a name. But introduce yourself to me and to everyone else, and there are a few questions that I want you to answer. But think about this as simply being at the office and taking a break and walking over to get a cup of coffee or to hang out at the water cooler, and you just start talking to some of your other colleagues and coworkers. So introduce yourself, let us know who you are. You can read the file on me called Intro to Dr. D, and you might find some nice things there. You might find some disturbing things there, I don't know. You will also find there a picture of me and one of my wife. So please do that after you get done listening to this. Finally, some very quick odds and ends. Yes, this course takes place Tuesday and Thursday, but here's the deal on that. I realize you have busy lives. What I mainly want you to do is make sure by the time the week is over that you have completed everything from Tuesday that's assigned and everything from Thursday that is assigned. If you're like me and you need to do everything assigned on Tuesday, great. If you need to do everything assigned on Thursday, great. If you're one of those individuals that works on a different schedule, here's my suggestion. Try to have all of the Tuesday stuff done by Thursday, and try to have all of the Thursday stuff done by Sunday evening. That way I have time to get in there, grade it, respond to you, all that sort of stuff. So no, you don't necessarily have to do everything when it's scheduled. That's why it's an online course. I will also put up Tuesday's course material online on Monday, probably in the afternoon, and I will put Thursday's course up on Wednesday, either in the morning or in the afternoon. So just expect that. All right, so that's the syllabus. That's a quick welcome and introduction to the course. And so we will get started with things on Tuesday.